So I was working on a completely different video, something about India's manufacturing sector. Why so many products that say made in India are still built with Chinese components. Dry topic, honestly. I was stuck. So I did what every procrastinating researcher does. I opened Instagram. And maybe 3 to 4 reels in, this video stops me. Leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi, standing somewhere that looks like a jungle, talking about an island, talking about destruction, talking about how the government is going to wipe out indigenous communities and the endangered species, all for a port that nobody asked for. And I'll be honest, my first reaction was mild concern. Like, okay, sounds bad. Government destroying a pristine island for what? A port. But as always, something did feel off. I couldn't name it immediately. It was just, that gut feeling. It was just that feeling. So, like any other Gen Z, I kept scrolling. And to my surprise, it was everywhere. And then I opened the platform of controversies, X, and my Twitter, X, is flooded with tweets, which is, of course, tweets from journalists whom nobody knows, self-proclaimed environment experts I have never heard of, academicians, a few international NGOs whose work is almost suspicious, all of them suddenly, passionately, loudly concerned about one island at the bottom of India. An island that, I'm going to be honest, I had never heard anyone talking before in my life, except when the airport was named after Veer Savarkar. People who had never once posted about a forest, never tweeted about a turtle, never mentioned tribal rights in any other context, were now deeply morally outraged about some turtles, specifically the leatherback sea turtle. And that's when my procrastination break ended and started actually reading about it. Because here's what I have learned doing this long enough. When something generates this much of coordinated outrage this fast about something this obscure, there's always a bigger story underneath. And the bigger story here is one of the most important things happening in India right now. And almost no one is talking about it properly. Okay, so let's start from the beginning, because I promise most Indians genuinely don't know this. India has this group of islands called the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, 572 islands in the Bay of Bengal. If you are Indian, you probably know Sri Vijayapuram, previously known as Port Blair, main towns, some beautiful beaches, maybe a school trip your classmate went on. That's where most people's awareness ends. But the chain of islands keeps going way south, post any tourist brochure, past any map you have actually carefully looked at. And at the very end, Great Nicobar Island, India's southernmost point, a place called Indira Point. Here is the number I need you to actually stop and understand. Indira Point is just 90 nautical miles from Sumatra, Indonesia. Not 900, 90. Honestly, the island is closer to Indonesia than it is to Chennai, closer to Myanmar than to Delhi. Geographically, it has more in common with Southeast Asia than with the India most of us picture. Now look at what's around it. To the southeast, the Strait of Malacca, a narrow strip of water between Malaysia and Indonesia. At its tightest point, just 2.8 kilometers wide. Now look, that gap is important because that gap passes 94,000 ships every year, a third of the global trade and half of the world's total oil supplies. It is the single most important waterway on the planet. And then to the north of Great Nicobar, just 55 kilometers away, the Coco Islands, Myanmar. And here's where the story takes a turn. China has a military spy post 55 kilometers from Indian territory. It monitors naval movements, intercepts signals, tracks ships passing through these waters. It has been there quietly, steadily, since the early 1990s, upgraded over the years. Almost no coverage in Indian media. No outrage, no viral reels, no petitions, just silence. And this whole time, Great Nicobar has been sitting there, 19 nautical miles from the world's most important shipping lane, next door to a Chinese intelligence operation, covered in rainforest, barely any infrastructure, largely forgotten. In 2021, India finally decided to do something about it. The government approved what they called the holistic development of the Great Nicobar Island, budget around $10 billion, roughly around 80,000 crores. 4 components. 1. A deep water transshipment port at Galathea Bay, the centerpiece. Galathea Bay is naturally 18 to 20 meters deep, which matters. Now listen, which actually matters because the world's largest cargo ships need exactly that to dock. India barely has any port that can handle them right now. We are sending our biggest trade ships to Singapore and Colombo to get transshipped. The target is 4 million containers a year by 2028. By 2058, 16 million. Singapore handles 37 million. This is India genuinely entering that conversation. 2. An international airport, civilian and military, 3,300 meter runway, long enough for any wide-body jet or any military aircraft. Right now, getting to the Great Nicobar from anywhere in India takes multiple days. It's a completely different adventure. This changes that completely. 3. A 450 megawatt power plant, hybrid, gas and solar. The island needs to be fully self-sufficient. A strategic asset that runs on cables from the mainland isn't a strategic asset, it's a liability. 4. A full township. Homes, offices, logistic zones, defense facilities. A brand new city planned from scratch for hundreds of thousands of people. The timeline is roughly from 2025 to 2047, 30 years. The government's own name for what they want this to become: India's Hong Kong, a free trade hub, a transshipment giant, a military strongpoint, all of it at the edge of the world's most important shipping lane. Now you may ask, hey Digant, but why do we need that? Now listen to me. To understand why this project exists, you have to understand what China has been quietly building for the last 20 years. Look, China has a geographic problem, and a serious one that people running that country think about constantly. 80% of China's oil imports travel through the Strait of Malacca. Yup. Now understand this. If that strait is ever closed, blockade, conflict, crisis, China's economy starts choking. Factories stop, fuels run dry, and China cannot fix this because the geography is permanent. This is called the Malacca dilemma. And China's response, to be honest, has been methodical, patient, and largely invisible to most people. A massive port in Sri Lanka at Hambantota, so close to India's southern coast that you can almost see it on a clear day. A deep sea port in Pakistan at Gwadar, right at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. A port in Myanmar, Kyaukpyu. Direct access to the Bay of Bengal. A naval base in Djibouti, Africa. China's first overseas military installation. And on the Coco Island, that listening post, watching every move clearly, silently. Now look at this map. On a map, they form a ring around India. This is what strategists call China's string of pearls. And India spent 2 decades just watching it take shape. Now, here's what India has quietly realized. About 60% of China's total trade flows through the waters around the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The Andaman chain is 700-kilometer natural wall running parallel to the Malaccan Strait. The Great Nicobar is the southernmost tip, closest to the strait, closest to where everything actually happens. Now see, India has had a joint military command for these islands since 2001. It's only integrated Army, Navy, Air Force Command. For most of that time, it was underfunded, underused, and almost invisible. The Great Nicobar project is India finally starting to act. A port deep enough for warships, a runway for fighter jets and surveillance aircraft, a permanent presence 90 nautical miles from the most critical waterway on Earth. This is not a development project. This is a strategic correction that is more than 20 years overdue. And the economics of this are just as straightforward. Right now, 75% of India's transshipped cargoes go through Colombo and Singapore. India is paying other countries billions every year just to handle Indian goods. A hub at Galathea Bay changes that completely. Okay, now let's go back to where this all started. That reel, this one. That Outrage the turtle. Look, I want to be fair here because some of what the critics are pointing to is actually real. Great Nicobar is genuinely extraordinary. 85% of tropical rainforest, UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, around 200 bird species, including the Great Nicobar megapode, an ancient ground nesting bird found almost nowhere else on the planet. And Galathea Bay, the exact spot the port is going, is India's most critical nesting ground for leatherback sea turtles, the world's largest turtle, by the way, critically endangered. They have nested on that beach for thousands of years. The project will clear close to 1 million trees, redirect 130 square kilometers of forest. And these are not made up numbers, these are real numbers, by the way. There are also around 1700 indigenous people on the island, the Nicobarese and the Shompen. The Shompen are among the most isolated communities left on Earth, largely uncontacted, almost no natural immunity to outside diseases. The concern about what massive population influx means for them, that is not a small thing. But here is where I start having problems. In February 2026, India's National Green Tribunal, the country's highest environmental court, completed a full review of this project. Years of hearing, multiple independent expert committees, every petition is examined. They cleared it, also with some restrictions. No loss of nesting beaches, corals to be relocated under scientific supervision, protected buffer zones for the megapode, the turtles, the saltwater crocodiles, 3 new conservation sites to be created on other islands as offsets, and nearly $1 billion, roughly around 9,000 crores, specifically earmarked for conservation and tribal welfare over 30 years. Okay, now here's the most interesting part about this story. The tribunal's own ruling called this project of vital national security importance. It named China's string of pearls by name. Even India's top environmental court couldn't separate this from geopolitics. So, let me ask something directly. Where was this energy when China built the Hambantota in Sri Lanka? Where were the petitions when the Coco Islands listening post went up? I mean, just imagine 55 kilometers from Indian territory and has been sitting there watching for 30 whole years. Where is any viral reel or tweet or at least a newspaper article about that? There isn't one. Absolute silence. People who have never mentioned the Bay of Bengal, who can't find Sri Vijayapuram on a map, who have never posted about a single environmental issue in their lives, are now the loudest voices against the sport. And when you look at who benefits from India not building this, the answer is uncomfortably clear. A developed Great Nicobar means India can monitor every ship passing through these waters. It means warships docked 90 nautical miles from the Strait of Malacca. It means surveillance aircraft watching the exact corridor that 80% of Chinese oil travels through. Every year this port gets delayed is a year China's string of pearls tightens. Every year this airfield doesn't exist is a year the Coco Islands listening post operates without a credible counter. Every year India delays is a year the strategic window stays open. The loudest opposition, this project serves China's interests more than it serves any leatherback turtle. The NGOs filing petitions in courts, the foreign funded think tanks producing reports about ecological devastation, the coordinated social media pressure, now all of this lands exactly the place Beijing would want it to land. Now look, I'm not saying everyone opposing this project is a Chinese agent. Most of them genuinely believe what they are saying, but useful and intentional are two different things, and the effect is the same either way. The environment matters, the turtles matter, the shrimpen matter. I mean that. But weaponizing them to block a project of national importance while staying completely silent about China doing the exact same thing all around India, that is not activism. That is politics wearing a green jacket or the red Chinese jacket. Okay, now let's conclude all of this. I started this whole thing procrastinating on a different video. A reel appeared on my feed and I ended up 8 hours deep into shipping lanes, spy posts, environmental court orders, and the most strategically underused island on the planet. And what strikes me genuinely is this: India has been sitting on one of the most important pieces of geography in Asia for 75 long years, while China built a ring of ports all around the Indian Ocean, while 75% of Indian cargo got rerouted through foreign ports, while a military listening post watched from 55 kilometers away and nobody made a reel or leave a reel, not even a newspaper article about it. Great Nicobar is India finally deciding to play the game. The environmental commitments are on paper and the government must be held to every single one. Tribal welfare fund, the turtle protections, the conservation offsets, all of it. That accountability is actually non-negotiable. But the project, the airport, the permanent strategic presence at the edge of the most crucial waterway on earth, that's not optional. That's what serious countries do. And every time you see a reel telling you this project is destruction, ask one question: why is no one making reels about the Coco Islands? Great Nicobar is about to become one of the most consequential places in Asia, most Indians still have no idea it exists. Now you do. Thanks for watching. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It does mean a lot. I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, Vande Mataram.